Hey everyone, welcome to You'll Probably Agree. And we didn't know what to really cover because there's just so much going on in the world. But then I think we landed on censorship. And there's a movie that is surprisingly relevant, especially if you read about Edward R. Murrow's life after Good Night and Good Luck. And that is, of course, George Clooney's 2005 version of Good Night and Good Luck before the play about the prolific Edward R. Murrow, who, uh, man, if you read about his life, is really sad because he was this journalist who took on a big figure and wanted to cover big stories, but then he was reduced to doing like late night fun sort of talk shows and stuff like that, or not late night, but you get the idea. But anyways, with us today is Jeff York from the Establishing Shot, who draws amazing compilations of his movies that he reviews and things that he likes, and we share some of that. And Don Shanahan from Every Movie Has a Lesson and Film Obsessive and the Cinephile Hissy Fit. There's a lot under his belt, but
Plenty.
I know Don pissed on my favorite movie earlier, but that's why I like criticism because not everyone
I
agrees on
did.
movies.
What movie was that, Mike?
Which one I
Yeah,
piss on?
Space Odyssey.
Oh yeah, that
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry, man. It's 3 stars and a yawn fest. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that's okay because you know what? If we all agreed on the same thing, movies would be really boring.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, talking about differentiation of opinion and the power of the spoken word, Don, how would
Mm-hmm.
because you beautifully synopsized
Two days in a row.
every what was it called,
Yeah.
like more battles all at
Yeah.
once or whatever. Yeah, every
One
day
battle
battle,
after another, Mike?
one battle after
Mm-hmm.
another, yeah. And of course the
Yeah.
sequel would just add an after another. But Don, could you synopsize Good Night and Good Luck for us?
I could try. So after a how do I say this? After a brief opening scene that takes place in 1958, which kind of telegraphs where you're talking about, Mike, just kind of the sorrowful or just not as gracious end of Edward R. Murrow's career, where we rewind 5 years to the crux of the story, which is about in 1953, at the height of the McCarthyism trials happening in Washington and all over the place. The junior senator from Wisconsin was busting a lot of people for, or questioning many people for having communist ties or communist history, and the far-reaching witch hunt that was there was something that divided a lot of people. Not just journalists, but just the general public. The hard part for the infancy of television, almost the infancy of television, was how do we cover this without editorializing? Because back in the day, it was the expectation outside of a special program would be just, hey, this is the news, this is the who, what, when, and where, by at some point though the McCarthyism situation and the divide of it kind of is the news. The I don't want to say it's I don't want to say the fallout, but just the repercussions or the gravity of those trials and the response to those trials kind of became more of the news than the trials themselves, which therefore asked for some reporting, or at least the sentiment was, hey, can we cover this, and then kind of choose a side, and in doing so, you kind of put the network on that by you speaking as the journalist that you are, as the person on camera. If you do that on somebody else's dime, on somebody else's camera, on somebody else's stage, through someone else's sponsorship money, that could be a bit of an issue if those particular people above you, who are above the pay grade that you are as the reporter, disagree with the slant that you take. So, and that was the risk that Murrow and his news team, his producers, his writers, his handlers, decided to take successfully but at the same time, now without consequences. And the movie kind of spells out the tenuous situation of, like, if we do this, how do we do this? If we do this, how do we present this? And then at the same time, getting on that mic when the pen taps the knee, can you say it the right way to the American people with a look in your eye and an assurance and an integrity that, hey, I might be choosing a side here, but let me tell you, I've backed it up and I've done my homework. So the movie is an interesting, almost episodic version of, like, the steps they took to get closer and closer to that story, to the place that they wanted to present it as. with nice little jazz breaks in between. And it's George Clooney's second directorial effort, if I remember his
Yeah,
career
the
correctly.
first one was Confessions of a Dangerous Mind.
That's what I
Yeah.
was thinking. And then Clooney is there as the writer, director, and co-star, but not the star of the movie. And that's pretty nice because you have a really deft ensemble of people around him that occupy different pieces and parts of that working environment. So, led by Edward Strathairn as your
David Strathairn.
as Romeo. David.
I keep
Yes, not
calling him
Edward.
Strahan. Nobody knows how to say it.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Strathairn.
Is it Strathairn?
Strathan. Oh God, I'm gonna screw it up all
Oh
night.
boy, the
Yeah.
TH, yeah. But that's about as best as I can do. So all of it kind of circles around to, hey, attaboy, good job. But 5 years later, you still hear from the bitter man that he would become. So the bookend of this movie to me and the speech that he lays out, I think kind of inspired us for the show, or at least this episode of what you got going, Mike. And it's it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Well, in some respects, he won the battle, but the television news lost the war.
Yeah.
So true.
Because not
Great way
only
of
did
putting
he get demoted and his show got basically moved to Sunday afternoons, so it was a demotion. But I think, news forever thereafter was fighting for credibility and a balance between entertainment and information. And two quick things just to build on what Don so deftly said is, well, first of all, they weren't trials, they were hearings. And it's a big difference because nobody was actually on trial there, though they were certainly treated like they were.
Yeah, but it was very Salem witches. Yeah.
Well, exactly. And they treated it like it was practically a trial with, McCarthy as judge, jury, and executioner. The other thing, though, that is kind of I don't know if it's stated out loud in the in the movie, but it's definitely a part of it. Is television was very much in its infancy, and they were trying to figure out where they actually stood in relationship to newspapers and magazines, let alone other sort of big structures or influential parts of the world, including the government and businesses and stuff like that. So I think it's also a fight for credibility, and where, to Dom's point, is the line between editorial and reporting. And I think Edward R. Murrow crossed that line very effectively. And I don't know if we've not been more sort of leaning into editorializing ever since on television, because so much is talk and personality and commentary. But it is fascinating because I think it couldn't be more about today's time. Obviously, that's why you picked it, Mike, with what happened with Colbert and Kimmel and what we're seeing going on with people and free speech throughout the nation, and the influence to pay money to shut up or play along with the administration. And, the great contrast here is that, you see really CBS and sort of giving Murrow quite a bit of rope, really, to sort of go, and William Paley supporting him by and large until the very end, when he kind of punishes him by putting show, because they've lost sponsorship and they're losing some money support and things like that. I mean, we forget that, or maybe we don't know, but at this time there was a man named Nat King Cole, who was a famous singer who had a variety show that won an Emmy Award for Best Variety Series in the 50s. And it couldn't get a second season because they couldn't get a sponsor for it because he was a black man. So, the sponsors, which were really sort of key to sort of singular sponsors for a lot of shows in these days, were very part and parcel of sort of staying afloat and staying on the air. And that's reflected here as well. So, Murrow and team were up against a lot. They won. They helped defeat McCarthy. They set the groundwork for his fall, which, he sort of stepped in it himself. But ultimately, I think TV sort of lost by the ironic ending of this, and maybe continues to lose in some respects to this day, because God knows we're still having that same battle one after another.
Yeah. Very well put. I like the little tag in the end there.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah. So I'm going to play a little clip from Good Night and Good Luck, and it's the only one for tonight. And I'm going to synopsize why I think that clip is not only very relevant to today, but why it was a kind of a powerful and ahead of its time message for them. And it always will be. But let's take a look at the morals of Edward R. Murrow. Murrow morals. I don't know. Maybe you can make that a thing.
We must not confuse dissent with disloyalty. We must remember always that accusation is not proof, and that conviction depends upon evidence and due process of law. We proclaim ourselves, indeed, as we are, the defenders of freedom wherever it continues to exist in the world, but we cannot defend freedom abroad by deserting it at home.
Yeah. Now you see, now here's a guy who's saying at the time, we are under attack from our own government, and if we do not do something as a people, if we do not speak against this, then how are we any better than people who let their own countries get invaded and ruined? And Edward R. Murrow's message back then, he was punished for it, as you said at the end of the movie. And the thing I like that they do with the chief executive of NBC, Frank Langella, William Paley, what I
CBS.
yeah, CBS.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. Did I say NBC? Gosh
You
darn
did.
it. You know
Must
what?
be thinking of MSNBC or something, Mike.
No, I was thinking of the time I was actually at NBC as a kid, and like anyway, but William Paley, he's not painted as like a bad guy or anything. He's just a person who defends his journalists, but he's put in a very bad position where they have to make money and they can't be canceled. And now we're having the same exact thing happen now, except these people, unlike Paley, don't have integrity. Like this Brendan Carr guy, all he wants is just to please the person who's on top because they have all the advertisers, they have all the money for Disney, for all the, oh, yeah, we actually represent multiculturalism. And then they turn around and do what they did now, just speaks volumes to what our CEOs are doing now. And this is a movie about integrity in journalism and also the punishment that comes with that integrity. Because if this movie was about Edward R. Murrow's life, it would have shown
Right.
how in the later years of his life he was reduced to doing entertainment shows. And there's a great bit from a documentary that I saw on YouTube that's like a transfer from an old VHS tape. So it was like real scratchy and crappy. Like it just kind of it just reminded me of like when I was a kid in school and they brought out the cart with the VHSs and you play the movie. But they said at the end that Murrow, he broke down in tears when he was like at the end of doing one of his shows that he didn't care for because he knew the integrity of News is Dead, and he died very shortly because he smoked 4 packs of cigarettes a day.
Well, yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah, and McCarthy died because he drank himself to death. And you could even tell in the footage of that movie when McCarthy's talking that he's just lit. Because like his eyes, even with that shitty quality from back then, are just like completely watery. And as a person who's worked with comics, I know alcoholics very well. So yeah, you have like a sad story about 2 men on 2 opposite sides. One person who's just a fucking monster, like the person in the White House now, and you also have someone who is rewarded, but almost pretty much like posthumously, after what he did with Murrow and with Murrow, what he did with McCarthy. So yeah, the movie is really about sort of people working at the best of their ability, at the best moments of their time, and how when we work together and we work hard together, we can actually use the power of media, of television, of this thing that can be exploited for cheap entertainment, just like how the internet is. We could research about the history of our country, the history of the world, but what do? We watch cat videos. And hey, I watch dog videos, so I'm guilty of it too. But this is a movie really about how journalism is important, and it doesn't really say anything about the 24-hour news cycle, but it does feel like it's editorializing. But there is a benefit to editorializing when Murrow would basically expose the monsters for who they are. But it wasn't Murrow who really brought down McCarthy, but more the U.S. military when Joe Welch came in and had the infamous "Have you no decency, sir" speech. But yeah, this movie really is about how we
But the
exercise
interesting thing,
decency
Mike,
and
is
compassion, and we expose the monsters for who they are and how our spoken word can take them down.
Yeah.
But
Or
let
just
me caution you just a second there, Mike, because I think you're actually painting the situation too bleak. Murrow was the first one who stood up to him before the Army lawyer did, Joe Welch, and he did it publicly on television. He was a very popular journalist. He was an entertainment journalist as well as a newsman. His show, See It Now, and some of those things were interviewing celebrities like Liberace, as well as, and they show that in the movie, as well as
Yeah.
political figures. But by him calling him to task in his editorializing during the show was incredibly brave and a breakthrough. And I think people paid attention, and especially compared to, Eisenhower said nothing because McCarthy was from his party. A lot of people in politics said nothing because they didn't want to get painted with the red brush. It was quite bold of Murrow to stand up and do this. And I think why it starts off with that award to him is already 5 years after he had basically sort of been shown the door by Paley with the show being moved to the weekends. He was already a legend. So I think you have to be just a little careful how you say, oh, he was depressed and down and all that. Yeah.
Oh no, I mean he
it
did
was not a
amazing
great
things. I
situation,
don't
but
mean that. I'm
he
sorry.
was
That might have
already,
come off the wrong way. Yeah.
but I'm saying, but also Murrow was recognized as being significant already then. That's why they gave him the award, and the Cronkites and the David Brinkleys and all those people who came afterwards, I think, had the template set from him. But what I think you're getting at, though, is interesting. Is we've learned nothing today. We have all these people who are paying the White House money. ABC paid $16 million for George Stephanopoulos's quoting of a judge who said a situation about Donald Trump's situation in the Eugene Carroll thing. And they would have won that case most likely. In fact, that's what most legal scholars who've been on television talking about it have said, including in the Atlantic and other places like the New Yorker. And yet ABC caved. They didn't want the grief, so they paid the $16 million. And a number of these other people have too. YouTube just being the recent ones for taking him off the air when he was saying, lies and things that were considered bad for the American public, and YouTube acted accordingly. It's the shocking thing is how so little has changed in 70 years, that you have all these people sort of bowing down and kissing the ring and being afraid and not willing to speak out. Now, there's plenty of people who are, and that's good. Obviously, the American people have done a lot. I mean, look at how their threats against, the Disney Channel got Kimmel back on the air in just 4 days. But it's shocking that, history repeats itself. And here's this great movie, and Clooney had the show on Broadway last year to remind us of all this. And yet all these people capitulating, billionaires, big corporations, law firms, big networks. And it's shocking. It's shocking that they're that cowardly.
Yeah. For me, it's to quote another great journalism movie, which is Follow the Money. I think this movie shows an example early on in the infancy of television, how sponsorship money greases the wheel to get their work done, but at the same time is a bit of an overseer to what, to either the message or the wavelength of weather. I know I keep saying wavelength tonight. But the same thing is happening still today. Like the corporate runners of these particular broadcast networks that have Stephen Colbert or Jimmy Kimmel are the ones getting their feet pressed to whatever financial invisible fire that they think can come from crossing the boss. And that is enough to push people into places. But but Jeff's right, where like we still have, where we've learned nothing is that the temerity, so to speak, of billionaires to think they can just clap their hands and push people around, it hasn't changed. They've been doing that still now as they did 70 years ago. So it's just really shocking that we've made it that far. And I love how Clooney uses that 1958 award speech as his bookend, because Murrow's I don't want to say assertion, but his definition, so to speak, of the state of television then in 1958 sounds so much like today. The opening lines of the movie and the closing lines of the movie are great. Here, I'll throw the opening ones, or a piece from that opening speech is, we have currently a built-in allergy to unpleasant or disturbing information because, hey, sex and violence still sell. Our mass media reflects this, but unless we get off our fat surpluses and recognize that television is being used to distract, delude, amuse, and insulate us, then television and those who finance it, key, wink, wink, those who look at it and those who work at it may see a totally different picture too late. and great words from Murrow then, that just echo like crazy. Now every little piece of that hasn't changed a lick, and it's shocking that we're still there. I'll get to the closing later when we talk some more, but yeah, his words are
Well, if you don't mind
dynamite.
me saying,
Go ahead.
Mike, too, just for a second to build on what Don said, the quote, follow the money, of course, is from All the President's Men, which is
Yeah.
very relevant today, too. And I find it fascinating because in the last couple of months, I've watched a bunch of these journalistic movies knowing what we're going through in this country, whether it was Spotlight, whether
Yeah.
it was, All the President's Men, this one, even Network. They're
Mhm.
all about where is news allowed to go. And
Yeah.
there's always some power that has it against the news and the truth.
Mhm.
I mean, in Spotlight is like, do we go up against the Archdiocese of Austin and the entirety of the Catholic Church? And there were a lot of people who didn't want them to because the Catholic Church is that powerful, but they did it anyway. In Washington, with the presidency, as shown in All the President's Men, how many times did Ben Bradley caution them, like, you guys are about to go out there and say that the Attorney General's a crook? You better
Mhm.
get the story right. You
Mhm.
can't go against these people because, they're going to come after you and they may shut you down or they'll get people fired, et cetera, et cetera. And, even Network. I mean, I think one of the, it played as a satire in 76 when
Mhm.
it came out. Now it is reality. But even
Yes.
Chayefsky said, though it was perceived as a satire then, he thought that this was about a year away from being reality. It wasn't too terribly far off of that. But,
Yeah.
news as entertainment and the importance of keeping the audience as entertained as they would be watching a Western or a cop show or I Love Lucy has become all the more paramount with every passing year in regards to how news is approached. And I think that's true of online stuff. It hasn't gotten any better. In fact,
No.
most of it is
Yeah.
given away to clickbait, just
Yeah.
because that's the sort of judge, the way they're judged on how many eyeballs they get.
Well, people always base their news on, is this guy relatable? I'll always remember way back when
Yeah.
Bush was in office, they had a poll, and it was during the 2004 election, and it was like, who would you rather have a beer with, John Kerry or George Bush? And I'm like, I don't give a fuck who I'd rather have a beer
No.
with. I care about who would defend my country. This
Yeah.
isn't, but we're so enveloped in celebrity. And that was sort of Murrow's doubt. Like, there's that great scene where he's talking to Liberace, which, there's the whole irony of, oh, when you're going to get married, which 1950, they found out Liberace was gay. Uh-oh. But you have Murrow who, he's surrounded by celebrities, but he wants to cover the real stories that hurt people. Like, I think one of his last things of journalism was about struggling farmers, and that didn't get covered as much because everyone bent to the will of the corporations. And when we give into fear, when we don't speak out against the very thing that is oppressing us, then we will fall to whatever that power wants. And now we're at a point where I feel like we're afraid to speak our mind sometimes, because if we do,
Yeah. A little
we
bit.
could get in trouble. And
Yeah.
Edward R. Murrow was a guy who did speak his mind. And where did it lead him? Lung cancer, depression, But the thing is that
I don't
he
know if that did it. I
left,
think it was the cigarettes.
but he is ubiquitous in what he left, and the impact he left with journalism was one of the greatest examples of how the First Amendment is something we can use to bring down the powers that try to oppress us. And it was really a movie about bravery, because and it
Sure.
doesn't play it simple where it's just hero worship. It's not this whole like Edward R. Murrow was a perfect guy kind of thing. We get enough of those biopics that I think are just propaganda. This is a movie about people who are afraid but decided to do the right thing, although they were afraid. But there were elements in their life that could hurt them. One of the greatest scenes is when they're sitting together in the room and they're going to cover Milo Radulovich and how basically McCarthy was accusing him of being a communist because he thought he, was an immigrant, and even if he was, so what? He served his country. But I mean, once he went after the military, then he was fucked. But I mean, you had a story where you had these guys covering these things that they were afraid of, but they decided to do it anyways. And there were flaws in them. These guys constantly smoked, they constantly drank, but at the end of the day, they did something that I think our 24-hour news cycle, they kind of just regurgitate, like Edward R. Murrow's work with See It Tonight. Like, that's kind of like the Citizen Kane for filmmakers, where everyone's going to copy the same thing. But he was the original guy who did it, and he did it wonderfully. And it's great that it's immortalized through this work.
I think one of the things, though, that the movie does very effectively as well, though, is it puts it in the context of its time. I mean, despite the fact that, and you sort of stated, I mean, everybody smoked and drank that back then. So,
Sure.
We look at that from our lens and know, smoking is bad for you and drinking to excess is,
and then they had that great ad for the cigarettes where they're like, "Hey, this is great. Get these cigarettes."
And Murrow smoked on, he smoked on air. He smoked on air during the show. Yeah. But I love the fact that they don't shy away from showing that, even stuff at CBS wasn't as ideal. Not only was Paley worried about the shareholders and the sponsors, but Joe and Shirley Werschbach could not talk to let everybody know that they were married, because married couples and was a no-no. And it was very tricky for a woman to even be in that profession. So they had to be very careful about that. And they had to hide that. And when they found out that they were doing it, one of them was told they were going to have to, resign. Additionally, you have the news anchor who did have some previous experiences where he was, protesting along with many people during college in the 30s on the side of communism, especially turning over, dictatorships and Franco and some of those kind of things. And, he ended up killing himself because, a paper journalist went after him. And so, Don Hollenbeck, who was the CBS News anchor in New York, was not saved. And as much as Murrow and Friendly tried to be encouraging and friendly, dare I say, to him, it didn't stick. So these people were not only flawed because of surface or things like smoking and drinking that we can use, but, their bravery went up to a certain extent. CBS's ballsiness went up to a certain extent. They only could do so much, and the Times forbade them from doing further. I would even argue that, to Don's point, and I love the counterpoint of the cutaways to the jazz songs that are being sung by Diane Reeves, sort of comment, almost like a Greek chorus on whatever's going on in the movie. And yet it's also an interesting thing that the black woman who is the singer there can say certain things via song that she could have never have said anywhere else in the world, especially in America at that time. But she could sing it. But if she ever gave that kind of editorial opinion about the news that was going on in a newspaper, magazine, on television, it would have been verboten. So, this movie, I think, is very much saying, the good luck part is, there's always these other obstacles around you. And whether it's shareholders today or, whatever business dealings and mergers that they want the FCC guy Carr to approve for them, and Carr is the handpicked crony of Donald Trump, so be it. They will find these reasons to push back on the Kimmels and the Colberts and other journalists and other people like that. And the tragedy of it is it's just writ larger now because it's a global world we live in, and you can see it affecting all kinds of sort of tentacles that come out of this. So it's a good movie to see, as is those other ones we talked about, especially All the President's Men. I mean, it's hard to believe they got that story out because nobody wanted Woodward to do it. I mean, there's that great line at the end where Ben Bradley says, "Do you know that like 65% of the country's never even heard of the term Watergate?" And yet 2 years later, that man resigned. Nixon resigned. So, but it's tough being brave because most of the world is against you.
I think I think a comparison from then to now, and Jeff is spot on about you have to approach this particular movie in its time where the volume in terms of like size of the scope of everything is just so much smaller. Yes, the McCarthy hearings were very very large, and like that scope was very very large, but the journalism pushback to it is just so much smaller. Whereas today, everyone shouts, and there's yellers on both sides, and the volume in terms of size and then the volume in terms of sound are both just so enormous today that it's hard to get a word in, it's hard to get your voice out there that doesn't sound like the next two people over that also yell and scream their thing. And then here we are with our ad fontes media bias charts every month and our fact checkers, and like somewhere along the lines we sided with the editor. We wanted editorialization. We wanted somebody like we would rather have a beer with as our as our news person versus, hey, am I really getting good news here or not? We lost that somewhere in the last, I don't know, 30, 35 years, where we just landed on personalities and buzz and the clickbait, and it spreads even into our profession of the film critic stuff, where negative stuff sells. Calling things trash sell. Calling things a masterpiece with hyperbole sells. So people have cranked up the volume in terms of like how they speak and how they deliver what they think they can deliver, even if it's good truth. It's just shouted so much that people, when you're surrounded by that much of it, none of it sounds what am I trying to say? None of it sounds poignant enough to pay attention to, when it all sounds like the same amplified noise.
Yeah, it's hard to it's really hard to define the legitimacy of an article or source unless it comes from a long known reputable source. I know,
like I'm one of those people where I get my AP news brief in the morning in my email, and I don't watch any 3-letter network or none of it. I watch none of it. So that's me, but I'm little guy used to read a newspaper every day, so that's gone away too. So,
and I feel like that was the benefit of journalism at the time, although they were very much silenced, and they're like, "Oh, just talk to Howdy Doody." But like back then, when someone spoke against McCarthy and it was editorialized, you would listen more. Because you wouldn't just turn on Fox News and everyone would say Trump is great, and you turn on MSNBC and they say, Trump is the is the Antichrist, which I mean, no way I believe, but you wouldn't have this constant badger. And then when you go online for your source, who's the winner of all these comments? It's just someone who comes up with the greatest sort of like clever insult / joke.
Zingers win.
And that's the thing. And now we're literally getting comedians silenced and all these other people. And the greatest thing, I think the greatest display of resilience that we've shown recently is when everyone canceled Disney Plus, because Kimmel came back real quick and it showed we didn't have to use weapons or fists or knives in order to get ahead. All we had to use was our opinion and make sure it wasn't silenced.
Wow. Hit them in their wallet. That's the only place it counts.
Well, exactly, because our opinion comes with our wallet, and when you give your opinion with that wallet, guess what? They're gonna want you back, and with a corporatized country, that works that way. And the benefit with streaming now is that you could just cancel a service, because it's not like cable, where it would just be on your general plan, and if you cancel it, you're screwed. Now it's like you have to pay for each individual network.
I'm a cord cutter too, so none of that's happening over here.
Yeah, but like Murrow, he really showed the ropes to it, but it really showed kind of like the pressure and camaraderie between these guys. Like this movie kind of feels like a thriller in a way, where everything is placed in a single location. You're inside the studio, which in real life they're in like 3 different locations, but who's going to know that and who's going to care? What really matters is kind of centralizing it for the narrative. And you have everyone inside the studio. It's kind of like a bunker. And then you kind of, like when people go and relax, they go to the nightclub, and it's kind of like your interludes between scenes, but everyone feels like they're trapped inside all the time and there's no escape, almost like you're in a television box, And yeah, when you get to Murrow's speech at the end, it really solidifies his viewpoint on, you know what, I did the right thing, and look at how far it took me. But in the end, it matters because people will remember, and you will make change. And
You
it
also
really is the
just
difference about camaraderie and change. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jeff.
no, I was just going to say you also had, I think, because I think the smaller sort of framework is a very important one, because in those days you had 3 networks and that was it. And so when the news came on, that was what people believed in.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, if you saw with your own eyes, you believed it. I mean, part of the reason that McCarthy went down is they saw him going after that soldier, and Joe Welch getting in his face about it and saying, "At long last, have you no dignity?" And even Murrow, when he said, "Of course he accuses me of being a communist because I don't agree with him." But that's the clip that you showed where he talks about dissent is not, punishable and corrupt and wrong. And people saw the truth. Now, the problem is, I think we've been talking about the similarities of this time, and even through All the President's Men and Spotlight and Network and some of those things. But now the difference is people can't agree on what one set of facts are, because it's different for the people who are in one tribe versus the other, and they get away with it. I mean, I think it is not incredible that after an $800 million, almost $1 billion lawsuit favored, Dominion, because Fox News for months lied about their changing the votes, which were all basic lies, and they have to pay that money, and yet we still talk about Fox with the same, well, they're one of the major voices and they're the top cable, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that kind of stuff 70 years ago would have taken somebody off the air. They were going to take Don Hollenbach off the air because he used to be a communist when he was a college student 30 years earlier. So, it's a chilling change in the time too. It's just as scary that things have not changed in 70 years.
Yeah.
But the changes that have happened in 7 years certainly are not for the better.
No, I think that apathy grows too, where, I mean, I'll connect it to what I was saying earlier with all the noise. Like when every time you turn something on, you're just getting yelled at from one side or the other, and it's editorializing. I can get why people would just be like, fuck it, let me watch a cat video. There's a collective apathy whenever this was post 9/11, even more post pandemic. Like, we're just at a place where it's exhausting to keep up with the Watergate a week we have around here. And then to see no one do anything about it, or what could possibly be powerful enough to even go against it. And since nothing's really stood up to do so, and elections have gone the way they do, it's hard to day to day, can you care about that many things when there's so many things going on? I don't want to besmirch the social justice warriors that are out there. Like, if they didn't, no one would. But at the same time, like, I can't stop and end everything I have to do because I have to make ends meet and do everything else in my life just for this one little news story that might piss me off, and then the 7 other ones last week that pissed me off. And at some point, you're just like, I'm just going to go to work and come home. And I have a positive version of that apathy that I live, but at the same time, I recognize that in myself. But at the same time, I at least stay informed enough to do my homework versus everyone else who just doesn't try after that, or only believes the one thing they've been told to believe. So it's so, I say this as an educator, like, there's just so much miseducation that's splattering all this, that's hard to do.
And how can you tell what's true anymore?
I go straight to the chart. Like,
you could say, like, I got this from the New York Times. I got this from the Washington Post. But then someone can counter it by saying, well, it's fake because I found it from this bullshit source, but they got all these clicks. So, you must believe me.
I think that's also the speed of the cycle. Like, but in this era we're watching this movie of 1953, when there's only 3 networks and the news was, I guess at the fastest, a 24-hour morning edition newspaper news cycle. But even then, it was probably like a 2 to 3 day news cycle. Like, stories would linger around until the next, maybe weekend, maybe even a week-long news cycle. And when you think about it, by the time news would get and percolate a little bit. But back then, they would only publish things they were just diamond short of in terms of like sources and homework and depth, where we'll just post rumors and horse shit now and just and for the clicks and for the different things, where the speed of accuracy is not fast enough for audience demand, and therefore people take shortcuts because they need to beat their competitors and get their clicks and keep their money and get an audience. And that sloppiness is what I see the most of. So
Yeah, and now everyone wants to be Edward R. Murrow, and
no one's even
they
close.
can't be.
No offense to Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel, they're nowhere close to Edward Murrow either. You're like, they're very sarcastic and they're very good.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and
but even if they're saying the same
smart,
things,
yeah,
it's your points, guys. Is anybody hearing it the same way? I mean, I think part of the charm, if you will, of comedians saying the news as they do is that they can spin it with a laugh and sort of lighten it a little bit, though, even though I would argue that those two gentlemen are sort of making a very stringent and strong commentary on it without being like the way maybe Carson was back in the day. I mean, Carson was talking about Watergate and everything else, but I think it was a different time and it was a lighter load and sort of a lighter a point of view. Though, when he went after Nixon, it was like, well, Carson is talking about Watergate, so it's sort of resonating with people, and they were maybe hearing it a little bit more effectively because it went beyond the news into those kind of shows. But the thing is, does any of it really change the world? It can. I mean, we talked about the fact that Kimmel came back on right away because of the power of the purse and people saying no to Disney Plus. But at the same time, there's the Lawrence O'Donnells and the Collins on CNN who are trying to hold feet to the fire and stuff like that. And yet, where does it go? I mean, they're talking to people who maybe believe in them. Candace Collins, is that her name? Candace Collins?
I don't remember. Sorry.
Anyway, but there's a couple of those people who are trying and kind of being sort of the warriors a la Murrow and things like that. But I don't know if any of it is effective enough, because right now you can dismiss it. I mean, they just put out a meme from the president's commercial, putting a sombrero and a Frito Bandito mustache on Hakeem Jeffries, making fun of their take on the bill on the budget and stuff.
Yeah.
And they asked everybody from Mike Rogers to every person who's been on the air representing the administration if that isn't racist, because it's like, oh, they're defending that we're not going to give health service to illegal aliens, which is not the truth. That's a lie about they get those services. They do not. The only services they get is if they go to a hospital. The hospital cannot turn away anybody who's coming in for care. And by the way, do you know who came up with that and passed that into law? Ronald Reagan. So there you go, folks. Anyway, but I mean, they're just laughing it off and saying, oh, it's a joke. Can't you take a joke? So there's no shame anymore. I mean, at least there was some sense of shame. And, whether it's Hollenbeck or McCarthy or, Paley having to face, the people at his country club or the store club, and what are you guys doing over there? Are you telling the truth? Or are you bullshitting around? Or are you just off on some lark? Yeah. Now you can be off on the lark, get sued and have to pay $800 million. And these people go on every night acting like they're still the strongest and most important voice in the wilderness. And there's no shame there whatsoever. They'll continue to say and laugh at it and do everything because their audience laughs with them. And ultimately, nothing gets done about it. How many times have we said, well, that's illegal for the president to do that. Well, they can't do this. Well, I shouldn't be doing this and in their Georgia. And yet, are there any arrests? No, I guess the Supreme Court said the president can do anything he wants. So that means the entire administration and the government today can do whatever they want, even though, the National Guard is not supposed to be policing cities and the nation, et cetera, et cetera. That's the big question. Is I think ultimately we see it's wrong, but what is our reaction to it? In the days of Murrow and McCarthy, there was some action because people had a sense of where that line was. I'm not sure we have that line anymore.
No, and I think if anything, we're outnumbered, or at least two elections have put this current particular president in office, showing us there's that many people who just don't fucking care and would rather want to be blowhard, want to let their freak flag of
They want somebody
bigotry
who
and
speaks
racism and all
the,
like this
angry
is their
voice
chance.
for them.
Yeah, like so this is my chance to support the guy who thinks the way I think. And we have, I mean, maybe they were pushed down and reduced because of times and economic crises in the aughts, or just the happy Obama years. But like now that this particular president has been in power twice, they're just like, this is our chance that we can say whatever the hell we want because he's unchecked, so we'll be unchecked. Like what the slap on the wrist of January 6th of like, you maybe spent what 8 months in the pen, full pardon when you're done. Like it's
That's extraordinary.
things that we would
And yet,
never
there it
fathom
is.
as getting through or being condoned. Just get we're outnumbered. We're outnumbered in the courts. We're outnumbered in the voting booths. That's the hard part. Is we could yell and scream all day from this other side, and Occupy Democrats make sure that we do. But even they're down that line of really editorializing and shout, being part of the shouting match. And it's either the wilds or the voting booth. That's the only place you can ever beat these folks, and we're outnumbered in both.
And even in the voting booth, we're screwed because they can just keep people who do not look like us away from voting as much as they want to. And there's no way to really stop it because they gerrymandered the courts. And then, of course, the moment someone who isn't on their side rebels, they like to label the entire side as violent.
Oh, yeah.
And then it becomes a competition of people blaming each other about who's more violent and who's not, when the whole point is, well, you're killing each other, so it doesn't really matter. And when you're screaming at each other, and it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So then how do you make a difference?
I'll tell you one thing that could
have
make
to
a
think
difference.
outside the box like Murrow did.
We don't have one of those today. I think I was going to ask Jeff this. Like, who's our preeminent journalist today? Do we have one?
I don't think we do.
Dan Rather's retired.
We watch young kids with YouTube.
There's no anchor or who would have
they're vanilla and they're middle and they're medium because they have to be vanilla and medium for their job. I like David Muir, but he's not going to stand up and take one for the team, and like it's not going to happen like that. So
there is no middle when it's Nazi and not Nazi, And I'm not saying Now here's the thing I want to clarify.
Okay,
is that I don't mean that if you're a Trump supporter you're a Nazi. I don't.
No,
I feel like there is a series of complications, whether it's personal, whether it's financial, whether it's other, where you need to find something that'll tell you what you want to hear. What you need to do is research that, and you need to find out if that really is in your best interest. And if it's not, there is voice, there is reason, and there are programs like See It Now that came out at the time that can lead you to the right place. But in this algorithm of data that we have now, how do you get there? And that's the most impossible thing.
But the interesting thing, guys, I think is there are answers. We just don't want to deal with them. We don't want to do this. And I'll give an example. Yeah. I don't know how many years ago, but it was, I think, maybe it was not Tarzan. It was one of those Disney movies that won the best song Golden Globe for Bono, and he got up on the Golden Globe stage, and it was live television, and he said, "This is fucking great." And they sued him at that time for, I think it was $50,000, because you can't say that in prime time.
No.
And my guess is it didn't really bother him to have to pay that. Maybe he didn't even pay it. Maybe his management did. But nonetheless, that happened. Now, there's no accountability for things. You can lie all over, and it doesn't matter. Now, if we change the FCC ruling that if you are caught lying on television, you have to pay $100,000 for every lie you told. Fox would not exist. A lot of networks would not exist. A lot of shows and bloggers and YouTube shows, et cetera, we could do that. That would get us back to a truth and back to accountability. I think that's what is interesting. Is Good Night, Good Luck is very much accountability. All those movies we've also talked about. There's no real accountability today. I mean, maybe to the shareholders or to, feeling the pressure, and somebody who's in the position of power can say, I'm going to take you off of Twitter or take you off the television set, or Sinclair is not going to run this until they're threatened to have the football games pulled, and then suddenly they put Kimmel back on. But if there were laws and things that really stuck, I mean, after the $800 million settlement against Fox, why do they still have a license? They knowingly did all that, and they did it for 6 months. They ruined a number of people's careers, a number of companies, a number of shareholders, and some of the stock market with that. And they were proven wrong in court 60 different times. Where's the accountability? Well, they have to pay that money. That's not enough, because they make more money than any other network. So that's going to hurt them, but it isn't going to hurt them enough to go off the air, whatever. If we started putting those kind of things in there, and again, I think it's term limits. I think, you repeal that Supreme Court decision that said that all kinds of money, any kind of money, and all numbers can come into political campaigns. That was a big mistake 20 years ago. The president should not have the powers that he has. There have to be checks and balances. If we do those kind of things, we can get back to being, a democracy and a country that we might recognize as being fairly close to Edward R. Murrow's time. But I don't know if we will, because where's the financial incentive to it? Everybody wants to cheat. Everybody wants to make the money. Everybody wants to tell their story, some worse than others. But I don't know if they're going to change it. But the FCC is one place you could start. If you lie, it's $100,000. And if you tell 50 lies in a television thing, you have to pay that money tomorrow. Oh, you don't have it? Then I shut you down. Boom. And that's true whether it's the Atlantic, Fox News, or Mad Magazine.
And it's according to their lies.
We'll let Mad Magazine off the hook.
Well, you said it, Mike.
Just anymore, but
But it's according to what their reality is.
Well,
it's like,
now
you
talking
said something against our leader. Well, then we'll cancel you.
Right. Well, here's the hard part. And that's why Trump's, whatever you want to call it, message or plan is working according to plan, because ever since he's been coining things that he's been coining as fake news, he's creating, even if it's the most thin, paper thin, transparent doubt, it's enough doubt that enough people listen to go, yep, it must be fake news because that guy said it was. And if we were to go with where Jeff's going, and I want that too so bad, like enough people have been indoctrinated enough in the other direction that if the FCC were to say, well, that's a lie, you're busted off the air, and someone's gonna be like, but no way, like according to your facts, like there's only facts, like you have created so much, or they have created so much doubt that that's almost as insurmountable in optics and in understanding and indoctrination as it is just getting the words and the laws right that would run the ship the right way. Like you could put, like, because Jeff's right, we already have a constitution and laws and bodies in place to make all of these things happen in a click, but we won't, because the public perception and fear of the people pushing that button is filled with misinformation and doubt. So or people pushing them with misinformation and doubt, or their voting constituents, or their wallets, so it's the theories are that, not only is he say theories, the steps are there, exactly as Jeff said, but no one's got the balls through all the fog to do it.
Well, I think that's why it's important to watch a movie like this, because you can see how back then, when you didn't have that noise, you did have a voice of reason. And how do you find that voice? And I think it's through your own compassion. When you're seeing people dressed up as soldiers and throwing like women and like other civilians, like guys like me who's like fucking 5'5" to the ground, you go, wait a minute, that isn't right. Why are they doing that? And then you have to listen to people who are speaking about that, because if it's just wave the flag and love the country no matter what they do, I'll be honest, whenever they do the Pledge of Allegiance in my school, I don't stand for the flag, because fuck that. What they're doing now, it is not standable, because we are losing our institutions, and it's our institutions that save us. And it was the institution of the freedom of speech that allowed See It Now to expose the monsters for who they are and to bring them down, so then we could have democracy and freedom among our people. And if we lose that freedom of speech, we don't have much anymore, and then we will fall apart.
Can I just quote one other movie that's
Yeah.
interesting too, that I think is a little bit of where we're at as a nation too. And I keep wondering, with all these things going on and ICE going into cities, and I think fundamentally, if you look at most of the polling, people know these things are wrong and they don't like it, and the approval
You would hope
ratings,
so.
stuff like that are continuing to plummet. And so I think it's maybe starting to catch up. But here's one thing that I think is fascinating. I'm going to quote another movie, if you don't mind, for just a second. But I don't know if you remember when Howard Beale comes back to the studio in Network, and he's rained upon, and he's seen the light, and he's got this sort of prophet's craziness to him, and he talks about people, as you'll remember, telling him to get mad, and he's mad as hell, and go to the window and yell out, "You're mad as hell, and you're not going to take it anymore." But one of the things he says in that, before he gets to that great line, is, I know you just sit there and you watch us night after night, and you want to be left alone. Oh, give me my toaster and my VCR and my television set and my steel belted radios and leave me alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. You need to take action. You need to know what's going on. That's part of the problem here too, is I don't think people see a lot of this hurting them as much as it's going to, or at least right now it doesn't hurt them as much.
Right.
And as long as they can still watch football on Sunday, and if you're
Buy
basically a good egg, you're not going to get in too much trouble with the law, blah, 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 that they kind of coax it along and it seems all fine. But underneath, of course, it's continually fraying and crumbling, and the structure and the infrastructure, whatever you want to call it, of our democracy and our nation is becoming that our allies are running away from us. They're doing stuff without us now because they can't depend on us. But I think our electorate and too many people out there think, well, I don't see troops in my street, or I haven't had my health care cut off yet, or my school's still open. And everybody seems to still care about what happens to Auburn or the University of Alabama on the weekend. How different is it? You can still see movies, you can still watch TV. I still get my Starbucks cup with my name on it, and I can still pick the choose.
It is textbook racism. It is textbook. I'm white. It's all right.
It's the me first is on both sides, though. It really is, like, because I call myself out. Like, I have that apathy of, I can't, like, I pick a topic that just isn't in Elmwood Park, Illinois, like Israel. Like, I want what they want. I want to see the change. I want to see some peace. But my day-to-day, walking my kids to school and coming home and paying my bills, that does not affect my life. So I have to set it to a different pile to care about versus another thing.
Back burner or other burners.
It is, and I hate to that. I see that on both sides. I see the indignance that you're talking about, like, it's not in my town, until because they're caring about their small areas, or they're in a red state where that stuff's not coming their way the way it's coming in these states and these cities. But then it's also, unfortunately, it's people like me who can afford, and calling out my privilege entirely, I can afford to put that on a back burner and just go about my day, keep my kids safe, do the things I do. Where until it would. People ask me, though, and I think you have to ask even the people who are on the other side of the political coin, who like, this doesn't bother me, or go get them ICE. Those people who are on the other side, is like, at what point is it wrong for you? Because you need a whole lot more buttons need to be pushed, like as Jeff said, than just a ruffle feather here, a one less talk show host here. Like, it needs to be farther. And I hate to say that it's going to take worse and farther to do it. But if you think this is a lot now, it's not even close to being enough. So like, I don't want enough to get here. I want us to be the wiser sooner, but we won't until, unfortunately, it's enough. So yeah.
That's why I want to speak truth to power. Because
and to
if we don't now, they'll just silence us and scare us, and that's exactly what they want.
But the interesting thing, Mike, you said it early, and Don said it too, and you've said it a number of times. I've talked to both of you. If it's kind of on the nation now, because they voted Trump in the second time.
Yeah.
We knew what was in the plan that was talked about on the news for a year before that. And if you weren't paying attention, then it's on you. And if this stuff comes true and you end up paying 4 times as much for health insurance, and you ultimately can't afford it, and then you wonder what you're going to do to keep your kids in braces or whatever the hell else it is, you'll cross that bridge and have to deal with it then. But the first time Trump ran, everybody thought, oh, he's a businessman. We need to run the country like a businessman. He seems to be a good guy. I watched that show he was on. But this is the man who said, let's inject bleach into our veins and sunlight during COVID and stuff. And they voted him out, but then they voted him back in again. And I know people who thought, well, I didn't like Kamala Harris's laugh, or I don't think a woman should be president. I mean, I've heard that from the modern world today, that you think, how is that possible? And Indira Gandhi ran India, for God's sake, back in the 60s. Hello, folks. Where have you been for the last 50 years? We're America, but we're not that progressive as those countries. No, we're not. But the fact is,
we're outnumbered.
Kind of on us now. Great for Edward R. Murrow, great for Paley for his stand behind him. Ben Bradley, the Boston papers, that covered the Catholic scandals and stuff. But we'll see if the American people continue to stand with them. They may stand alone and then ultimately say, well, the American people aren't with us, so we're not going to fight.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things about the movie we didn't get to say, but that's okay.
Also here, his last lines, the close of that 58 speech, I'll quote it here because if you don't have the clip. To those who say people wouldn't look, they wouldn't be interested. They'd be too complacent, indifferent, and insulated. I can only reply, there is, in one reporter's opinion, considerable evidence against that contention. But even if they are right, what have they got to lose? Because if they are right, and this instrument is good for nothing but to entertain, amuse, and insulate for today for sure, then the tube is flickering now, and we will soon see that whole struggle is lost. This instrument can teach, it can illuminate, yes, and it can even inspire, but it can do so only to the extent that humans are determined to use it to those ends. Otherwise, it is merely wires and lights in a box. Good night and good luck. So like he called it. He called it, and we're there. Like, look at the just the sheer volume of TV. Like, and I'm granted, I mean, it's a fantastic place to entertain and amuse. We're on YubTub right now, like doing this right here. Yeah. So, like, it's great, but buried underneath that is what you're talking about. People that are either speaking for truth or a good place to find it.
Yeah.
And the government just cut off funding for Sesame Street. That's
wow.
Where we're at.
So
right
Mitt Romney finally got what he wanted against Big Bird.
Well, Netflix is supposedly, I think, going to try to salvage it.
That'd be great.
Their own money for it, which is great. And that's again somebody, citizenry stepping up and filling the void, which is great.
Deep pockets too. Like,
but the fact that the government is making Big Bird the enemy is a tragedy.
Yeah, I mean, they're making Big Bird the enemy, and basically anyone who doesn't look like us, and that's why, that's why I like this movie, because, it's one of those stage play films.
Great film,
but it doesn't just feel like you don't feel like you're just watching people monologuing. Like, there's a certain style to it, because they filmed it in color, and then they desaturated it and then printed it in black and white. And it, and thank God, because I couldn't imagine seeing this movie in color. It wouldn't be as memorable.
I agree.
And their shoot days are only 9 hours, and I really like the simplicity of it. I like how it's just 2 cameras and it's just people talking, because you feel like you're in the room at the moment. And with those jazz interludes, you kind of are able to settle in. And it kind of makes you feel nostalgic for a time that you haven't even really lived in. Like, I don't know if any of us were around during 1950, but like when they had that banquet and they had the club and everyone's dressing up, I'm like, oh, what happened to that class? Now you have people like Alex Jones walking around, dressed up in sloppy shit like me, and he's got like a Hitler mustache now. And like, that's where we've gone. And this is what Murrow warned us about, like you said, Don. In his final speech, like, we could use this just for entertainment, but there's so much more potential.
So much more.
Yeah.
So much more.
We don't.
For me, this was the best film of that year for me. I know Brokeback Mountain's there, but and Crash won the Oscars, but this was my #1 film of that year. I know Clooney would get his producing Oscar for Argo, 7 years later, but this was, I thought this was spot on. It's the best thing David Strathairn's ever done. Not that he's not bad, but I mean, this is fantastic to see Clooney take the sidebar seat on this as well. Nice little part for Downey Jr. and for Patricia Clarkson. Not a bad miss in the entire cast.
I mean, Jeff Daniels is in this, and Ray Wise.
I was going to say Ray Wise is a really underrated.
Frank Langella. Some really good people.
But
in there.
93 minutes, tight as a drum, interludes and all. It's just perfect. No more, no less, spot on.
Yeah, and I wish more movies were this length because they like to draw it out more.
Wish.
I feel like if a modern filmmaker showed this, they would show the later years of Murrow's life and how he got punished for this. But it's like all of it's like the movie's about the power of the spoken word, and his speech in the end just solidifies, what happened to him, which is, they forgot about me, and then everything became, as they say in the end, they turned it into Disneyland. And that's kind of where we're living in now as a fantasy land. And, this movie is really about reality and how, they even adapted it into a play where Clooney played Murrow with this horribly dyed black hair. But this is a movie that I think it was one of the films that should have won the Oscar. Crash, which is, and I don't use this word unless it really deserves it, but Crash is some woke race bait shit, and even Paul Haggis came out against it. Its own director. Yeah, and I get the era why it came in, and that was the era when people
why it won.
Actually cared about what Kanye West said when he said George Bush doesn't care about black people. A lot of people were like, "Yeah, that's true," and you know what? Maybe he was a little right, and maybe he was a little wrong, but either way, now Kanye West doesn't care about black people. But that's a whole other story. Yeah.
But this was Crash, Brokeback Mountain, Capote, Good Night and Good Luck, and Munich at Best Picture back before they had 10, and that's a tight 5 where hindsight 2020. I know Brokeback's up there, but I'm a Good Night and Good Luck guy. Maybe Munich second. Yeah. Jeff, where would you have slotted that race?
I'm with you. I think of those 5, I would have probably put that Brokeback at third. But definitely, definitely this one first. And I think Munich is the most underrated movie of Steven Spielberg's career, and I think it only looks smarter with every passing year.
Yeah.
It looks like it was nominated for 6 Oscars, won 0 of them. So
Yeah, that's okay.
So,
I'll take an Elephant Man win.
He had some films that were ahead of its time in that era. Heck, I also liked Sin City that year. I thought that was an
I didn't see the second one. Everyone said it sucked, and I'm like, I know Robert Rodriguez is very good.
Mickey Rourke, he won the Chicago Film Critics Best Supporting Actor Award.
Oh, did he now?
Bravo. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So I think it's time to give our final ratings for the movie before my bladder explodes. So I think we'll start with Don and then Jeff and then me. Don, how many out of 4 Guinnesses, and I add the half, how many out of 4 Guinnesses would you add?
This is the top 5 journalism movie of all time for me. It's like All the President's Men spotlight in this that are like 1A and 1B. So this is full 4 Guinnesses. No question about it for me.
Absolutely. All right, Jeff, where do you land?
I'm not only going to give it 4 Guinnesses, I'm going to give it 4 packs a day.
Here we go.
Something to go with that
Guinness
from Mr. Morrow. Go ahead. Have 4 beers, have 4 packs.
Yeah.
You know what? It's a 4 out of 4 for me as well. And here's the thing. It's not because it's topical. I loved it at the time. It wasn't because it spoke against Bush, but it was about people who were under immense pressure, who could have lost their careers and said, screw it, we're doing it anyways. And it's like, I like to see more movies like that. And it aspires to be, it's a movie about us at our best and how we aspire to be that. And absolutely. I can't believe Crash won. But I mean, look at Nicholson's reaction when he reads the envelope. His eyes go up like, are you kidding me? And then he reads Best Picture. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for coming on. Check out Jeff York's work at theestablishingshot.org, Don Shanahan at Film Obsessive, and everymoviehasalesson.com. There is the info below. If you liked what you listened to, check out ypareviews.com. And if you have TikTok, YPA Reviews Chicago. And thank you so much. Good night and good luck.